Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us at the March 7th session of the Milton Warrant Committee. I'm happy to call the meeting to order. Lynn, would you kindly take the roll?
Sure, George. We have Steve, Lorraine, Dave, Kristen, John, Aaron, Muhammad, Christine, George, Kathy, Emily, and did I miss anybody?
I just joined, JJ O'Connor, thank you.
Oh,
JJ.
Hi, JJ. Great, terrific. Okay, our first order on the agenda is the discussion of the meeting minutes from our February 9th meeting. Lynn has informed me that by some error, they did not get transmitted in time. I suggest that we defer this meeting minute acceptance, review and acceptance until our meeting on Wednesday. If there's no objection, we'll just continue with the agenda. Arthur Doyle is here. Arthur, are you prepared from our select board? Arthur, are you prepared to discuss which of these, we have several articles, and which of these are you taking and which is Mike Zulus taking? Because I know Katie Conlon has had a conflict after all.
She has. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zulus will be addressing the first two items.
Okay, we are perfectly happy to go out of order. I don't think he has joined yet, so
he is here.
Oh, he is. Oh, Mike, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. I apologize. Welcome. If you're, oh, there you go. How about that? And my goodness, you didn't have to dress up for us, but we're very flattered. Thank you very much.
I always try to look my best for you, George.
Well, it doesn't take much. You should be proud of being a professional. Mike, you have the floor, and we're interested to hear what you have to say. Just please, before you begin, identify the article you're talking about, and if we need to have a screen share, I think we have the documentation, and I think Lynn will control it unless you have it and you need to. You tell me.
So I think it'll be Lynn, and there has been a change today. It was two articles that were identified as the quote unquote land swap articles. They have become one article, and that was, that was circulated today by town council to simplify the matter and make it a little bit more clear both for this committee and for town meeting.
Now, for the good of the order, this, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the land swap that will accommodate any potential development for the new elementary school. That swaps the land that's adjacent to Guile Road with land that's on Herrick Drive and on Randolph Ave.
That's correct, George.
And it's one article now as opposed to two, which makes it easier for us to vote. So thank you.
That's correct. That's correct. And just as a quick preface, and I'm going to let Shauna O'Rourke, who is the chair of the committee, go through this in a little bit more detail so the committee can have all the information that it needs. But just as a quick overview, this is the culmination of about more than 2.5 years of work of the school building committee to identify the best location and the most cost-effective solution for a potential new school building in Milton. We needed to find 6 acres of land for this, and that's been no easy task in Milton, whether public or private. And to find 6 acres of land at no cost that was already public land has been almost impossible. But this represents that, solution. This proposal, as you pointed out, is for land that is behind Brooks Field and borders on Guile Road and Blue Hills Parkway. It's just under 7 acres of land, and it is currently conservation land. And what we are seeking with this article is to change the designation of that land from conservation land to land for general municipal purposes, so that it could be used, if the town decides, for a new school building. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have to identify other land in Milton that's not already conservation land to try to make up for that 7 acres. And what we've identified, as you pointed out, George, is non-conservation land that abuts conservation land at Herrick Drive and on Randolph Ave, and that totals approximately 9 acres. So we're taking 9 acres adjacent to existing conservation land. We want to turn that into conservation land to make up for the 7 acres that we want to convert to general municipal purposes land for general municipal purposes at the border of Gala Road and Blue Hills Parkway.
Mike, do you mind if we have any questions? Do you mind if we interrupt? I don't want to the flow of your presentation. So fast question on this one that I think would be of interest to the membership. Does the conservation land that is at Guile Road currently include any wetlands, and would there be any problems with the environmental department on that score?
Not as far as we understand, but in order to conduct a full review of that, we need to make sure that we could use the land. We don't want to go down that road unless there's a possibility of using it. So if we find that that's a problem, it can always be converted back. But we don't want to go down the road of spending money, vetting the land, reviewing the land until it's actually an option. And right now it's not, because it's not designated in that way. And so that's the reason we want to move forward with this. And I just want to point out three things that are connected to this. And that is, one is, as I mentioned, it's a no-cost proposal, which is huge.
Yes, enormous.
Number two, we're not seeking consent for the building of a new school or a specific plan for a new school. We're just seeking, again, changing the designation of this land so we can move forward with this progress. And the school building committee can try to move forward to meet its charge of planning the construction of a new school building. Once we meet that charge, then it's up to this committee, and then it's up to town meeting, and the residents of this town decide if they want to move forward. Our goal is to give them the best plan to vote on. In order to do this, we think that we need to move forward with this land. So with that, happy to address any questions, but I'd like to turn it over to Sean O'Rourke, who can give you a lot more specific detail on why this is important.
Before we do that, Mike, is there, since it's the designation is ostensibly for use by the school building committee and for purpose of constructing a new school, is it conditioned that this conservation land would be for that purpose? And would it be germane to put in a proviso that it reverts to the original use and designation rather than have it in that state as a municipal piece of land that could become, oh, I don't know, a McDonald's or a casino or something like that?
Yeah, so the current article as drafted by town council provides that the land would be used for general municipal purposes, including without limitation school purposes.
Okay.
Right? And so it's our view that since we're seeking to move existing land into conservation land, if we want to move that back, the town can make that decision later on, but there would probably be another mixing and matching exercise at that point. So that's why we seek to do it that way. So
I guess the concern would be that if a developer came and offered an outrageous amount of money and wanted to put, I don't know what, but something that would be out of scope, out of scale, and certainly something that would make neighbors go apoplectic, even though it's outrageous money for the town. I guess this is the question that would be something looking forward that the Warrant Committee and certainly the town meeting would want to know about.
Well, the town would control it, and town meeting would control it, and the residents would control it. We couldn't just, the select board couldn't just willy-nilly said, well, let's sell this plan to a casino. We couldn't do that without going to town meeting.
Okay, I suspected that, but I want that in the minutes as well. Kathy, your hand is up. You have the floor.
Maybe it just dovetails off what you were just saying, but so is there any impact on the neighborhoods at this point, or is that too premature to look at that?
So no, it's not. And Sean can talk about some discussions that we've had with the neighbors, with residents in the town. That will be ongoing. I think there have been some concerns raised by the Friends of Blue Hills Parkway about the conservation land. But again, this plan is to put more conservation land back from Herrick Drive and Randolph Ave than we're taking out at Kyle Road.
Where is the land on Randolph Ave specifically, Mike?
So again, I'm kind of jumping into Sean's.
Oh, okay, all right, forget it.
He's got pictures of it and everything. He'll show you exactly where it is.
We'll table that before we go ahead and recognize Sean. Steve, you have a question?
Yeah, I just have a question. So we're deciding moving land around in town, and we haven't even had the first conversation about a new school. So I don't understand the process here, why we're shuffling land, paying legal fees and other things when I think it's a long ways off before we decide we need a new school.
So it's a chicken egg thing, right? Right. So, and again, all we're doing is we're not paying a lot of legal fees. We're just paying our town council to do the article and some deeds. And so it's not excessive cost. It's just a question of, do we want to continue to designate this land as conservation land, or do we want to have the option of using it for school building later on, based on the procedure. And on our committee didn't want to go down the road of spending money, spending time, spending all the effort to come up with a plan for this site and then have town meeting say, well, we don't want to use that site. We could spend 2 years coming up with a plan, and then town meeting could say, you know what, we want it to stay as conservation land. We thought it was important to get that judgment up front before we go down the road of all of that effort and all of that money to come up with that plan.
So effectively, to make an analogy of painting a wall, this is priming the wall before we actually pick the color and put the paint on it.
I think that works, George. I have to think about it, but I think that works.
Well, I'll take it. I try to be poetic here. I have been criticized for my poetry here, but we'll use it for the time being. Anyway, Mohammed, you have your hand up before we go to Sean. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Mike, thank you very much for the additional information. Maybe I missed it, but why are we trying to trade the current land we have? Couldn't we use the current land for the purposes that we are trying to get?
You can't. When you have what's called Article 97 protected conservation land, you can't use it for general municipal purposes. We wouldn't be allowed to use this for a school unless it's taken out. And it's actually, this article gives the select board the authority to petition the legislature. We have to go to the legislature in order to do this. And so this article gives the select board the authority to go to the legislature and say, hey, we want to do this. We want to take this land. We might want to use this for general municipal purposes, but here's 9 other acres, right, that work good as conservation land. And so that's why we have to go to the legislature to do that.
Okay. Does that help you out?
Yes, thank you.
Terrific. Okay, Sean, you have the floor. Take it away.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair. My name is Sean O'Rourke. I'm the chair of the School Building Committee. I think some of you might have seen some of my presentations at town meetings. So, Mr. Chair, as you know, I try to be as concise as possible. So,
no, we appreciate it, and we enjoy your presentations because they are to the point.
Perfect. We're hoping to do the same tonight. We do have a video that we'd like to display for everybody too, but at first, I do have a presentation prepared. If I could share my screen.
There we go.
Yep. And switch. Perfect. And just let me know if it came through, okay?
Yeah, it looks great.
All right. So basically a quick overview of what I want of the agenda. I kind of want to cover as quickly as possible. A brief introduction to our panel of our committee, followed by an under 5-minute video of the overcrowding that we have within the schools. And then followed by, again, a concise presentation to kind of look at why we're going down this road and give some further context to the article Mike talked about. So quickly, as some of you are aware, we're a committee of 9 members. 5 of us at the top are a mixture of design and construction professionals. We're appointed by the town moderator. On the bottom left are members of the school committee that were appointed, Ada Roseburn and Betty White, who I believe are on the call with us tonight. And also on the right-hand side at the bottom are members of the select board that were members that were appointed by the select board, including Mike Zulis that represents the select board tonight too. So one of the things we've been trying to do for the past 3 to 5 months is to develop some content for everyone to consume. I mean, right now people look at the schools and they see beautiful buildings, they don't understand the problems that we're talking about. So what we're trying to do is give a insider view of what the schools are going through right now. Basically, a look inside the walls. So if I may switch my screen, perfect. I just want to double check that if you could tell me if the audio comes through. I know she's screen sharing. Sometimes the audio doesn't come through. No.
We don't hear the audio yet, but
If you give me 1 second, I can just change that. Share.
that is a beautiful view of the Glover School
We have some more.
and
So
Turner's Pond.
how about now?
You got it.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, you guys are here to film the pinch, right?
One of the biggest challenges I see is the overcrowding. In an ideal situation, particularly at your elementary levels, you would like to keep class sizes no more than 18 to allow for our teachers to give individualized attention.
You can definitely see that there are spaces that are smaller, there are spaces that are gone. So if you want examples, if you think of the library, we have a classroom of second graders, which also happens to be our biggest second grade classroom, in a space in the corner of the library where there used to be extra shelving for books.
Art room, but the music room, allowing for some space to sing, really was just too small. So as you'll see, we've actually now converted our gym. We've split it down the middle with the curtain, and half of the gym is being used for music 3 days a week, and the other 3 days a week is being used for PE.
Up in our library, what had been our maker space, which is a big space of our library, is now being used as a digital classroom for our Fuse and technology classes, which, you know, on one hand, we've been fortunate to have a little bit of space to create another classroom, but you know, that kind of came with the loss of the maker space too.
So our music room we were able to preserve it up until this year. But this year we had to transform our stage in the cafeteria into a music room. We had to take all of the instruments that are usually stored and on display for children to access, and we had to put them in a closet.
And that does create a bottleneck. That does take up time, which means the teachers leave earlier to make sure that they have enough time to eat, which cuts away from, you know, core academic time. And there's sort of no way around it because you're cutting something and you want to make sure once they get in the cafeteria, those lines, you know, they have enough time to actually eat before they go to recess. So you can't fault the teacher for leaving earlier to get them in there because all of that takes more time because more classrooms and more students are going into those spaces.
We often hear from students and families that one of the most stressful times of the day was lunchtime. You know, the students have about 20 minutes to find their way, find a seat, get their lunch, eat it, in what was a borderline sort of hysterical environment where you
choreographed their day in such a way that we are sort of smoothly moving a lot of children through very cramped and tight spaces.
I mean, as far as our teachers, it's cramping their space. It's very difficult to break up into small groups when you have 28, 29 students in the class.
We've given up a lot to provide great services for our children, so it feels great to be able to do that. What we sacrifice is quality of planning time and locations for our staff, the opportunity to find a quiet place for planning. Planning with colleagues is sometimes not so easy. It's not easy to find that space, but we're working together. We're figuring it out. We're very grateful to be in beautiful buildings, but if I'm being honest, I have teachers sometimes taking meetings from their car.
And when you look at the current enrollments in the 4th and 5th grade now that are nearing 400, you know, ballooning the size of, you know, teams to 125, 130, 140, what your class sizes are going to be enormous. You're going to be talking about 28 to 30 students in most on-team classes. So math, imagine classrooms of math and English and science and social studies with pushing 30 students in there.
We are continuing to grow, like just as a point of note, when I started at Tucker, I believe we were at 350 students, and we're about 470. I mean, and that's just within, you know, our 8 or 9 year time span. So we've grown, you know, pretty dramatically, and I don't think people realize that.
Have an issue that we have to confront in terms of our enrollment, and status quo of you know, both from school building, physical plant, as well as, you know, personnel and programming, are going to have to evolve with our enrollments and with the complexities that come with that, if we're going to be able to continue to offer our kids and families the same high quality education that the students have enjoyed.
Sean, that was very interesting because it underscored and I think magnified a lot of what members of the Warrant Committee saw. Oh my God, it's at least almost 3 years ago now that Mary Gormley took members of the Warrant Committee on a tour of the schools, and we witnessed firsthand what was happening. So it's just something that's accelerated over time. And it did two things. It alerted us absolutely to what was happening, but also underscored the incredible creativity that the principals and the faculties have had to employ just to keep things going. I mean, to see Colleen Martin running a music program at Glover School on the stage, and she's not even doing a performance, is, you know, kind of sobering, because that's what happened when my kids went to Glover 20 years ago. And we thought we were past that 25 years ago now.
Yeah, it's for me, it's been eye-opening myself too. As you know, I just moved to the town about 3 years ago. So, you know, all of this is all brand new.
Yeah.
As I go through these slides, you know, similar to Mike's discussion points, if there are things you want to touch on or jump into a little bit, feel free to interrupt as I go through them. So the next kind of portion of slides is to talk about the enrollment data and kind of our proposed grade configurations we're looking at right now. The historic enrollment for the district. So what you're seeing on blue or on the left-hand side is from 2008 when the last schools were done till current year. And essentially what that is enrollment from pre-K through 12th grade. So every school in the district. And as you can see, it's fairly dramatic.
Wow.
The projections that go out are interesting too, because the district hires a company called NESDEC to do their projections. And NESDEC essentially takes certain criteria into account, mainly birth rates within the town, and then extrapolates out 5 years and said that many kids go into the kindergarten, and it goes on. Previously, they didn't overlay or take into account real estate transactions, which always skewed or at least made their estimates very conservative. The ones that you're seeing here don't take into account future construction projects either. So we're going to have roughly 700 units of 40B projects coming in over that same time span that are not accounted for our students. So,
but also that aren't approved yet. So let's be honest about that. Those are not done deals. So I mean, if we go hyper on what could be built in town, my God, we could have, you know, Rockefeller Center put up in Milton as well, and we'd all be worried about that. But let's deal with the realities. Those things are way down the road. And also, some of us remember when, you know, Cunningham School was in mothballs when the birth rate dropped. So I mean, there's an ebb and flow in this town for those of us who have been around a few years. So, you know, I'm not going to doubt that we have a need now, but let's also not go crazy saying we're, you know, the sky is falling in.
Well, yeah, and I mentioned that only because NESDEC takes that same approach where they don't take that into account as they're going. You know, the increase in numbers as it goes through, if I can just go to the next slide. This slide for me, I'm an engineer, so I try to look at things differently sometimes. So the previous slide that you saw was pre-K to 12. This slide is pre-K to 5th. We were just kind of focused on the elementary level. What happens on this one is we flip the axes around. So the previous one had time on the x-axis. Time is now on the y-axis, 2007, 2008, the current year. On the horizontal axis of the x-axis is the enrollment data and broken down for each grade level. So as you can see, when you crunch the numbers out, it's about a 2% compounded growth every year going up. And what it is when you overlay that with real estate transactions, there's a direct correlation of, you know, people buying, you know, new houses with children from people that didn't have children. And, you know, when you overlay that transactions, there's a spike in the next years in kindergarten and first grade. We didn't include that as data because I thought it'd get a little complicated, but happy to jump into it at any time. But essentially, that graph that you see there is housed in the bottom portion of this graph here, which is our existing architecture of 4 elementary schools, as everyone's probably aware, that feeds up to a single middle school that then feeds up to a single high school. Right now, as our committee, we've looked at 2 options, and our preferred option right now is creating a new middle school and upper middle school, essentially at the same campus of the land that we talked about before. So by identifying this land and kind of changing paths in our direction for a new school, what we're creating on that high school area is what I'm calling like an educational campus. And this is reflective of what the town of Belmont's also doing with their new high school project, where they have the high school and 7th and 8th grade all together at one area. What we would be doing here in the elementary schools to alleviate space is pull out the 5th grade and pull out the pre-K and relocate them. So the Pierce with this project too would also get changed to, rather than housing 6th, 7th, and 8th, would only house 5th and 6th. So we would provide additional capacity or space at the Pierce Middle School. And then with the new middle school that we'd be creating, we'd have 7th and 8th grade in there. So essentially, and the other part that comes in too is the additional space that we open up at the Pierce. We can move district offices from the high school down to the Pierce with the empty space or the available space that we have there. So this one project kind of addresses all the levels of the district. So when we look at this graphically of that previous graph that I had up, you know, we looked at it, highlighted the 5th grade and pre-K and looked at what those would strip out to be. And they bring them below the building capacity, which is that yellow vertical line. So, you know, graphically it worked for us, but we wanted to see space-wise. So we jumped into a previous study that was done by DRA Architecture that did the previous school building project. They studied the district back in 2019 and came up with an assumed program over 10 years and, you know, what the shortfalls were with the current facilities. So by stripping out the 5th grade, we free up 16 classrooms, so we can check that box right away. The pre-K classrooms that we pull out would be 8, and we'd only need 4 kindergartens. So we could do that with a basic remainder of 4 classes that are bigger that we could spread out to address the special ed and the art and music. The site selection, which I think is the meat of what we want to talk about tonight. As Mike mentioned earlier, we've been, the biggest thing with this project has always been, where is it going? How much will it cost? And when I took over as chair a little over a year ago, you know, my goal was to identify a site. So previously, you know, we issued an RFP, or request for proposals in the town, and we didn't have any responses, and we, you know, kind of comical. So we were looking to buy land, nobody wanted to sell. So Tim Zawinski has been extremely helpful in this entire endeavor. He provided a list of available parcels that are out there, but 72% of them were below 4 acres. And with some of the concepts you're going to see in coming slides, you'll see 4 acres wasn't even close. We needed 6. The remaining 30 parcels that were on that list are already the schools, park, conservation lands, and town-owned parcels for town hall, police headquarters. So that's essentially how we arrived at the site that we're talking about now, which is this area, southern portion of Gow Road. It's a parcel which is identified as D656A, and it's made up of a number of smaller parcels, but the larger one that we're looking at is, on the survey that we have right now, is listed as parcel C, which is approximately a little under 7 acres. We've worked with a survey company to come up with a boundary survey. There's additional survey work we need to do, but you know, I just presented this slide just for context so people can see a little further. This one, so our committee, I believe a member was talking about, you know, expenditures that we made so far. You know, our committee coming up on 3 years ago has allotted $40,000. We've spent, I think, at most $12,000 right now in 3 years to get to where we're at, the majority of which were these concept designs. So we hired DRA Architecture to take that land and basically put pen to paper and start, seeing what a school would look like on here. So the first part of it is, very high macro level. Where's the building going? Where's the parking going? Fields, stuff like that. And then it morphs. And we've come up with, a conceptual design that we can put in front of people to get comment. What you're seeing is development of the site with a 3-story building. The first floor corner that you see there would be the preschool wing. And then this is essentially be a 3-story structure with the upper floors mainly being classrooms and a library. So for the proposed land swap that Mike was talking about, we've been working with the town. We identified, the 6.8 acre parcel, which is our proposed acquisition that we want to take out of conservation land. The 2 parcels that we've looked at or identified on Herrick Drive are parcels E1735 and E1734. Both of which are extremely wet. They're unbuildable and they lend themselves to conservation land. And the adjacent parcel that there is also conservation land, so it gives it a unifying factor. The other parcel that we looked at, which was one of the parcels that we did look at for a school at 1.2, I think that was addressing what one of the other members was asking about earlier, is about a 30-acre site that's across the street from the Carriage House School on Randolph Ave and where the access road that led up to the town dump before. 2/3 of that site, the upper and lower portion, are already conservation land, and the middle portion that's there is about 6 acres. The problem with this land, we did look at it to develop it for a school. The problem is there are vernal pools, wetlands, and potential artifacts and stuff on there. The topography of it too would cause a lot of headache too. So in closing, the simple math of what we're looking to do is take out, as Mike mentioned, about 6.8 acres of conservation land, and then convert an additional roughly 8.8 acres of non-conservation land into conservation land and unify it with the adjoining parcels. And that's it. Thank you.
Sean, thank you very much. And thank you very much for all of the work that you have put in here and your committee as well. You should all be complimented. Questions by the membership? I think we probably can, if nobody objects, we can probably bring this to a vote this evening. But questions from the membership. Christine, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you for all this. For me, the question of whether or not we need a new building is a little bit separate from what we're considering tonight, which is, is this conservation land where it is for a reason? I would love to hear anything you've heard from the neighbors, from the Blue Hill Parkway organization that you mentioned, that I just would love to consider all sides of this issue. Does anyone have any?
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure, so initially when we identified this site, we knew that discussions with the neighbors were a high priority. Our first meet or discussion outside of our committee with this was with Home Inc. To let them know they were going to be our direct abutter. So we approached them, presented them with the issues that we're facing within the school right now, and then how this land is, we weren't this deep as a presentation, but how this land would really work for a school. Part of the presentation too, when we had DRA do the concept design, that bottom portion wall there is solid. It's all classroom. There's no play spaces back there, any noise considerations and stuff like that, that we took into account. Further, as we go forward, we want to meet with our neighbors. We don't want to build something that's going to be a problem for other people. We're conscious of that. For Blue Hills Parkway, we did meet with members of that community too. I know one of the concerns is, this is conservation land. There's a lot of aged trees that are on there that they like to preserve. And there are a couple of things that I did on my own research. One being, as we do that further survey, have a survey done for trees that are a larger diameter and see what's there on that survey and how we can integrate it into part of the project or keep them. One of the other more creative ones I found was in San Francisco, they have a project called Kindergarteners. And what they did is they were building a kindergarten on a site with a lot of trees. And the trees that they cut down, they saved samples of them and let the tree grow somewhere else and replanted them. So there are different creative ways, we can look at this problem, and address it. But, as a committee, we're working towards it.
I guess what occurs to me is we're transferring conservation land to a pretty affluent neighborhood near Glover and taking it from the Parkway. Did the Blue Hill Parkway Association have a conclusion, a recommendation, anything that you can share?
They have not. As part of the lead up to town meeting for this article, we want to meet with them again. But we have not met with them yet, so there hasn't been a conclusion to answer you.
For what it's worth, and maybe it's just me, Mr. Chair, I would love to hear from them before a vote.
That's a lovely idea. I'll see if we can do it. If that's the nature of it, if they can come to a meeting, that's fine. But I genuinely don't know if I can absolutely postpone a vote just for one, an input from one organization. But they're welcome to come, and I'll take that under advisement. Mike, you have the floor.
Just to point out, the change in the designation of this land doesn't mean something will necessarily be built there. We think this is the best place for it, but there's a lot of opportunity for considerations from the neighborhood, considerations from the Parkway. This just allows us to continue our process to come up with a plan, right? To spend the money and the time to come up with a plan. And if something's not built there, the land continues. I mean, and then the town continues to be in control of the land, which means town meeting is in control of the land. So
in which case the Blue Hill Parkway Association can go to the town meeting and make their views known.
And to the Warrant Committee and to the
whomever.
So the decision tonight isn't, are we going to build or not there? The decision tonight is, do we change the designation so the school building committee can continue its work to create a plan for consideration?
Actually, the decision is, do we, the Warrant Committee, vote to recommend this for town meeting's consideration? I just want to be very specific about that. We deliberate, we don't decide. So, other questions? Kathleen, you have the floor.
A quick question. If this is not a viable option for whatever reason, is there a plan B or something else that might be considered?
Good question.
Not at this point. If this isn't, I mean, Sean, you can weigh in, but my view is that if, we done a lot of work to get to where we are now on this one. The other options kept falling away, right? So if we don't have this one, we're back to square one.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on it, there were other sites that we did look at. Our initial one out of the gates was St. Mary's of the Hills and approaching the Archdiocese with a 99-year ground lease. They did not want to do that.
Good luck with that one.
Correct. I mean, we looked at St. Pius, a site that's adjacent to the parking lot. The problem is it was about 3.5 acres. And if you see from our concepts that's too small of a parcel.
Would it be if the church, I can't suggest this, but if the church itself and its parking lot became available with that empty parcel up there on Walcott Road, would that be, would the total of that make it a viable parcel?
I would have to look at it, but potentially. Yeah. I mean, knowing that one parcel is 3.5 acres, I think the church and the parking lot were a little bit smaller. So it might. I think
that could come up to a total of 5. It may not make your threshold though, but that would be an interesting location as well, because that is a big empty space up there.
The one other one that I do, and I say this jokingly, is there's, as you can see, there's no land available in town. We can do an air rights development over at 93 at some point if we want to go down that route.
Oh, there's an idea.
You know what I mean? The company I work for, we do a ton of them, and we'd be happy to, I recuse myself, happily jump in. But, part of what we've done is the amount of work that we've done over the past 3 years to address this. We're trying to not only find the right site, but do the right project. If you recall, initially we were looking at, our first option was just a new elementary school, and we studied it further and further. And we've come up with this option that we really like. as a singular project that kind of addresses all those levels. And the location of the site works for that option. It creates that campus that's there, whereas if we take something somewhere else, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, no, your creativity here has the evolution of it has been very interesting. Kathy, have you finished your question? Do you have a follow-up?
Just one thought that, like, if there really is no plan B, then I think Christine's suggestion of asking about what the neighbors think is really relevant.
Okay. Dave Humphreys, you had your hand up, but you took it down. Do you still have something you want to ask?
I think my question was really to this. Is there a backup plan? Is this really looking like the site? I guess I make this point, is that it looks to me like what we're doing is a swap. We're going to take two parcels that are essentially not buildable and then take a buildable conservation area and swap it out for other areas that could probably not be developed. And it's my sense that one of the important parts about conservation land is that sometimes the most important parcels to conserve are those that are buildable. Because the developers will come to this town and develop every single lot that they possibly can. And as stewards of our town, I think we owe it to keep parts forever that could otherwise be buildable to be not buildable. I grew up in Acton back in the 70s, and they had tremendous foresight back then to build, to establish conservation areas that could not be built upon. And if you look at what Acton has become since that time, I think that that was a really important decision that's made. So I'm just raising that point, that sometimes I think the best and most important parts to conserve are those that would otherwise be developed. I have concern, however, if it's for the school, that's something to be considered. We're not talking about a Tedeschi's. We're talking about the school, understand the presentation. So I'm just, again, saying that it seems important to me to know, is this the call? Is this where this thing needs to go? Because in order to develop that land, I think we'd have to be up against that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. John Driscoll, you have the floor.
Yeah, is this part of the Lamb Sisters estate that they left in conservation, that they couldn't build on it?
I
Someone
think
answer that?
My recollection is that it was because I remember when the Lambs deeded this years and years and years ago. But Sean, you can go ahead and answer.
So we're going against their will, their wishes.
I don't know. I don't know about that. Mike?
Yeah, you can go ahead, Mike.
So my understanding is that this was put into conservation land in the 70s. And I don't know the actual driver of it right now. So I'm not sure whose wishes it may have been. But all I can tell you is that right now it's town-owned land that's controlled by the Conservation Commission as conservation land.
Yeah,
it's town-owned land.
Yeah, if I could touch on it too, Mike, in discussions with town council, to answer your question, it is from the Lamb estate. The land was purchased, not given to the town, but I think it was in the 70s.
Amy and Rosamond Lamb were the two surviving sisters. They're two lovely old ladies.
Yeah, and we, this isn't something, as our committee, we've kind of run off on our own. We've been hand in hand with town council throughout this entire thing. We're aware of, the deed on it, certain restrictions that were there, but they still feel this is a viable option for us to do, and that's kind of why we're before you tonight.
John, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Are there any other questions? I think, though, under the circumstances, Mike, please go ahead.
I just want to say, George, there was a question, I think, or a question of whether this was the call. I think it might have been Mr. Humphrey said, well, was this yes, this is the call. This is the culmination of 2.5 years of trying to find out what is the best location and the most cost-effective location. And so this is the call. And in order for the committee's work to go forward, that's what we're seeking. But
okay. Does the committee have a consensus? I'm now hearing from two members. We're interested to hear what the Blue Hill Parkway Association might have to say. Erin, I'm sorry, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say just a couple of things. First of all, we know that the land in Milton is very scarce. I recall many of us talked about this for years about the fire building that we needed. And thank goodness the Archdiocese was willing to negotiate with some miraculous folks on the select board who got that through, and that we're able to put the new firehouse there. This land that we're talking about, you know, John brings up an interesting point about the wishes of what somebody might have willed to the town. And it reminds me of the Kidder Branch Library that we have voted that they could, you know, sell and do whatever they wanted to, which was not, you know, really what Kidder had intended on that either. So I think, you know, part of where we're at is that we need to recognize and understand that there is no land unless there's any one of you that sits on 6 acres that would like to sell your home. You know, I know that these folks have been looking for years and years. This is not a new thing. They've come to us multiple times. Before them, it was the fire building committee that came to us. So this is not a new or unusual request. And I just wanted to really quickly say, Christine, it's not by the Glover School, actually. The Glover School is on a totally different side. This is over further up the road from the Tucker School. So it's more, it's closer to that end of town where Yulin Rink is, kind of, you know, that way. So I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on what land we're talking about before anybody thought that it was in a more congested area by the Glover and by Milton Academy.
Oh, the Herrick Drive, I'm sorry, I have to correct you on that. Herrick Drive is off of School Street, so it's actually is closer to Turner's Pond and to the Glover. It is nowhere near the Tucker School.
So it's not on the side by the, hold on a second. Is it on the side by where the football field is?
No. Do you want to pull up the map again just to show us exactly where it is? But you'll see it go the two little pieces. It's Herrick Drive is a circle and it's off of School Street. And there are two pieces of land that are actually close to the little stream that feeds into Turner's Pond. If you want to throw that
I would like to see that because it looks like it's over by the football field, over by that other community.
If I may, I'll clarify this real quick. So, Erin, the parcel you're talking about is the parcel we're taking as part of the school building project, you know, the conservation land we're taking. The parcels that the chair is talking about are the ones at Herrick Drive that we're converting into conservation land. So each of you are talking about different parcels of land, but different uses. So Erin, you know, being specific, the parcels that you're referring to is where we want to build our new school, which is Guile Road by Blue Hill Parkway. I can pull that parcel up. The parcel that I think Christine was talking about and the chair was talking about are the parcels that are over at Herrick Drive that are empty right now. We're going to convert those into conservation land.
But the school that we're talking about, the possibility, which we haven't even gotten to that point, but the possibility of it being built is over by the football field, correct?
Correct. Let me share the screen.
All right, good.
You're right there.
Because I thought I was going crazy there for a second. So,
no, you're fine. Bring it up. Just show it up on the screen so everybody's clear once again.
Yep. Sorry about that.
It's okay. I mean, thank you, Sean. I really do appreciate that. I just didn't want folks to, so there's no more congestion of like traffic around the Glover. It's going to be, closer. Right.
It's on the Parkway.
Yep.
Yeah, it's on the Parkway.
Now, Erin, I was talking about the new conservation land will be over in a much more
this one
affluent neighborhood.
And that's over.
Glover's
right there. Exactly.
And I mean, I'm sure we'll have a portion of this meeting for discussion among us, right, George? After the questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So this is only just to transfer the land today, correct?
It's to change designations. Yes, exactly right. We're not making any decisions about what's going to go where. It's just a question of what's going to be conservation and what isn't. our
Okay,
recommendation.
I got you.
Got it? Okay.
All right,
Sean, do you
thanks.
have anything before I recognize Steve?
Yeah, if I could just touch quickly. I mean, the one thing that hasn't been asked tonight, and I don't know if I'm stealing Stephen's thunder, is our timeline right now. You know, for this project, we've submitted with the MSBA the past 2 years. We haven't been selected. We're probably going to resubmit again this year. With that timeline with MSBA, it's about a 7-year timeline. Identifying this parcel of land has been critical, and getting this into our availability for this project is really critical because it just pushes this timeline further off down. So I just kind of wanted to highlight that tonight, why this article at this town meeting is so important.
Got it. Okay. Steve, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you. So I just had a question. I don't see anybody here from the Conservation Committee. Is there any input from them on they're in favor or not in favor, or we don't include them in the process?
No, at this point, we are planning to meet with them. I've reached out to John Kiernan. Our goal is to meet and talk with them about this process. I have reached out previously, but you know, things I think within the town have been extremely hectic for the past couple months.
But Arthur Doyle is on the Conservation Commission and he's at the meeting. Not to put you on the spot, Arthur.
Yeah, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Please direct your comments to the chair. Steve, have you got your answer?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I haven't heard anybody from the Conservation Committee and what their recommendation is, and it sounds like that's a key part of what we're trying to decide.
But the question is anybody from the Conservation Commission been included? And I think the answer to that so far is no, and we haven't heard from them. And I think the sense is that some of us would like to have that happen.
Yes.
Okay,
please.
terrific.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? All right, if that's the case, we can move on. We will have a discussion about this. Let's go through the remaining presentations and then we'll circle back to those. Okay, let's see. Arthur, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I would extend the greetings of Chair Conlon, who sends her regrets at not being able to be here this evening. The topic of the street acceptance of Woodland Drive has per meeting involving both town council and the town's director of planning and community development been part of the understanding for the development where this way exists. And I can say, going back to the reference as a member of the Conservation Commission, that while it is not jurisdictional to the Conservation Commission, that during the many public hearings that were held by the Concom on the development of the town farm property, that in the site walks, maybe Mr. Humphries would give the Concom a merit badge on hiking for all of the number that we went through. The assumption was that this, again, would be a townway. If I'll ask if Mr. Zulus, who predated me on the select board, has any comments that he might want to add.
No, I think you captured it all.
Okay, are there any questions on that?
George, can I ask one?
Of course, John.
How come they accepted this new development for public way when they didn't accept like Fletcher Steel? I mean, up there on Brush Hill Road, Low Circle, there's a couple of big developments for elderly housing. I know they're gonna come after you now that you accepted this, and they have to pay contractors to plow their roads and stuff. I just think it opens up a can of worms going down the road here. I just don't understand the reason why you'd accept this road and not take on like Low Circle, that Kathleen Way on Pleasant Street. And I know of a bunch of places I plow that I'm sure they're coming to your door about it.
we have a response to that?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have a response, but we'd be happy to look into that and bring it back to the Warrant Committee.
Okay.
I don't know if Mr. Zulus has a comment on that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of those that have come forward yet. Maybe John's talking about the fact that they may come forward now. But I'm not aware that we've had them so far.
Okay. All righty. Okay, that's good. I have a hand up for, I do not recognize who it is, but somebody's hand is up. Can you please identify yourself?
Mr. Chair, Tim Zerwinski, Director of Planning and Community Development.
That's great. You said you come across as Timmy, and the only Timmy that I can think of is Little Boy and Lassie that I used to watch on TV. So I apologize for not being clairvoyant, knowing who you are.
I'm on my phone. I'm not on my laptop. I was unexpectedly pulled into this meeting tonight, so I apologize for that.
Not a problem. Now that we know who you are, you have. It's good for the minutes too, so you have the floor.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to see if I can fix that. It's been a long time. So I think I can answer a little bit of Mr. Driscoll's question. The issue of when and how the town accepts a subdivision road as a town road is really driven by the developer of that subdivision or the eventual residents of that subdivision. So, in the case of Jill Kathleen Way, which is one that I was involved in the approval of that at the planning board, that was a project where that developer intended from the word go to have a private way for those subdivision homes. And that was how the planning board approved it. And there wasn't any role for the town to come in and say, we actually want that to be a town way, because that's just not the way that the process works. In the case of Woodlot Drive, from the very beginning of the discussions with Pulte to develop that project, the understanding between Pulte and the town was always that Woodlot Drive was going to be taken as a town way. So the way that the planning board approved it and did their evaluation of the dimensions and everything about the standards of construction was sort of towards the eye of, we want this to be a public way in the end. The process by which, I'm sorry, I can wrap up there if you want.
That's fine. I have a question for either Mike or Arthur. Is there we don't have a designated number on this article, do we, yet? So I'm hesitant to vote on it, or at this point. I don't think we do. And we haven't seen the text per se.
Nor have I, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something. Okay, that's fine. I guess we will, is there any other info you need to share or would like to share with us on this one? If not, we can move on. And I think unless either of you has further input for the remaining, you're welcome to stay, but if you have further input on the remaining articles, you could be excused and go on and have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will stay for the master plan implementation article.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. I'm going to stay as long as humanly possible, and then I'll.
Mike, look. It's always interesting to have you there because you have a perspective, having sat in this chair that I've sat in for a number of years. So it's always helpful to me also. But anyway, our next item on the agenda is just that, the Master Plan Implementation Committee. I guess, Arthur, are you going to quarterback this one?
Cheryl Tajayas, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Cheryl, of course.
Cheryl is the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Of course. I apologize. Shame on me. Cheryl, are you with us?
I am, George. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It's nice to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. And it's nice to see you, as well as the rest of the members of the committee tonight.
Well, welcome. We're interested to hear what you have to say.
Well, the Master Plan Implementation Committee, I think has been in place for at least 6 years. Yeah. The master plan was adopted nearly 7 years ago. And what we're looking to do is really diversify the committee a bit more. 2 of the 5 members are from appointed boards. So I'm from the planning board and Arthur's from the select board. So that only leaves 3 members from the public. So we would like to diversify or expand that a little bit, in part because The master plan itself, as you may know, is 3 volumes and it's many pages with many recommendations and implementation strategies. And as much as we try to follow up on how we're making progress on it, with some staff support from the assistant town planner, we still could use some more help. We're sort of working our way through that as we think about whether we would recommend in 3 years to update that master plan, because our committee has a 10-year window. And at the end of that window, we are to recommend whether the master plan should be updated. And so we would like in the next 3 years to really be able to delve into the 6 sections a little bit more, check in with the departments and boards that are responsible for implementation, and be able to really deliver a comprehensive report to the town at that time. So we'd like the 2 extra bodies, Jill.
Well, having read it, and I compliment all of you who put it through, it's gripping stuff. I guess the question I have is that I have a couple of questions. First off, what is the mechanism for adding the other 2 members? And what is the profile of the individuals you might be looking for?
Well, we
If there's a profile.
Yeah, we didn't change the profile that's in the article that was approved that established the committee. And that was that people have some background in things related to real estate, architecture, landscape architecture, engineering, planning, and so forth. So we didn't request.
So having a shoemaker on the committee probably wouldn't be in everybody's best interest.
Well, you know, it's interesting. We currently have people who fit that bill pretty well, but we also feel as if, you know, having people who represent different parts of the town and maybe different demographics would be valuable to us as well.
And how would they be appointed or elected, or how would it happen?
Yeah, they're appointed, but it takes a recommendation or appointment both by the planning board and the select board.
And who is the appointer?
Both bodies.
Oh,
No.
all right. So
Both
they would
the planning
send,
board
they
and
would,
the select board.
okay, so the planning board would identify an individual, the select board would identify the individual, and they're voted by those bodies and they would become members.
Well, the way it's worked in practice is there's volunteer forms that people can fill out through the select board's office or through the town administrator's office. And so, for example, we had a vacancy open up this year. One of our members needed to resign. And so we, through our assistant town planner, inquired about who might be interested and who had already expressed interest. And so there were 3 candidates. The master plan implementation committee discussed the candidates and made a recommendation to the select board and to the planning board. And then those 2 boards took votes in support of that recommendation. So what we would do, I suggest we would probably do here is put out some kind of notice on the town website, perhaps in the Milton Times, saying that we'd be expanding the committee, and people who would be interested would submit their applications. I think it's not, maybe not really an application, but it's a expression of interest to the town administrator's office. And then we would review those and make a suggestion to those 2 bodies again.
Terrific. Questions from the membership? It seems relatively straightforward. Does the membership have any objection to taking a vote on this evening?
No.
Because I think that this is reasonably straightforward, and I think that I always think that more eyes on a problem often deliver more interesting solutions. So if there is no objection, the chair will entertain a motion to approve for recommendation to the town meeting authorization of a 7-member master plan implementation committee.
So moved.
We have a motion and it's been made. Do we have we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Lynn, please take the roll.
Steve,
Yes.
Lorraine,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Erin,
Aaron, are you muted?
I'll go back to Aaron. Mohammed?
Yes.
Christine?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
JJ?
Yes.
And back to Aaron. Maybe we lost her.
Oh, I hope not. Okay, well, anyway, we have a majority. It passes. I thank you very much. So, Cheryl, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, and also thank you for helping us pass our first article of the annual town meeting. There's one down, and I don't know, 49 to go or whatever it's going to be.
All right, well, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, you too. The next item on our agenda is the planning board to review and discuss our town meeting for zoning recodification. Who's carrying the ball on that one for us?
Good evening, Chair Asher. That will be Tim Cherwinski.
Oh, terrific. Thank you, Denny. Tim, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you all may remember, I think it was in 2017, the town meeting voted to create the bylaw review committee to essentially take a look at the all of our bylaws, general and zoning, with an eye towards basically getting them online in a kind of modern, contemporary, searchable, user-friendly form. That work has been ongoing for quite some time. I think the bulk of the work that the committee's been doing so far has been on the zoning bylaw, which is, again, as you're all very much aware, a very complicated set of regulations. And we're finally at a point where, working with the bylaw review committee and our vendor, General Code, which is a company that does this sort of thing for municipalities across the Commonwealth and across the country, we are prepared to bring to town meeting basically a recodified zoning bylaw, and what that means is that it's really kind of formatting and organizational changes. There are no substantive changes to the zoning bylaw, so everything that town meeting has ever voted on since 1938 is still in there. But the way it's organized has been changed, and that's a function of how General Code, our vendor, organizes bylaws and puts them in a sort of an online format. If you search the bylaws for other towns that have this system, it's a web-based system. You can search, for different topics. It kind of, the way we have it now is it's a static sort of PDF of the zoning bylaw. That is, again, if you know what you're looking for, great. But if you don't, it's kind of difficult to get around. And so the way that we anticipate this working, just by virtue of, the complicated nature of the work of converting, a format that we've kind of put together over the course of decades into a brand new format is, and this sounds like, I think, a bigger deal than it is, we're swapping out the old bylaw and swapping in a brand new one. And I say brand new, not because there's any new substantive changes, but it's organized in a different way. And rather than sort of go line by line, chapter by chapter, section by section, saying, we're going to switch this here, we're going to spell this way, this is going to be an A instead of a 1, we're going to just swap out the whole thing. I apologize. I have the deputy town planner on his little bicycle following me around the apartment. So if you hear him commenting, I apologize for that.
So that's all right. The day's going to come when you're going to be able to put him to work. So enjoy it now.
So we're not. So there, you should have an. I submitted an article to the select board by the deadline. I hope you have it. I heard that you didn't have the Woodlot Drive article, and we'll rectify that. First thing tomorrow morning. But basically, the article is generally very simple and says, we're effectively what I just said. We're going to take the old bylaw and swap in the new one. What we're going to provide the town. Oops, sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, that's fine. So the issue for us is that we would be looking at. We don't have the exact text, if I'm understanding properly.
Yeah. So I'm actually anticipating. getting a final draft of the text from our vendor, General Code. I think we'll be getting it next week. I'll check in with them tomorrow. But that's the timeline that we've been working on.
As fast as you can get it to us will help us to move through this. So the questions that remain is how much does this cost? I'm sure there's a cost associated with it, and how long is it going to take to have this process carried through?
So that money has actually already been appropriated by town meeting. That was a planning board appropriation several years ago. I've actually been carrying that encumbrance on my budget for ever since, which
So
is something I just realized.
Nothing incremental is coming through them.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that we need to kind of figure out, because there's still, so all of it's been paid for. There's no cost that we're asking for town meeting right now. There may be a cost to do the rest of the general bylaws. We still have money in that appropriation to do that on that contract. But I'm working with our finance director and with our vendor to kind of figure out what what a cost for that would be. But we're not there yet, and we'll figure that out.
This is something the Warrant Committee has been in favor of as long as I have been involved. So I think this is a very good start. I mean, to have the zoning bylaws put in an intelligible format for neophytes and slow-minded people like me would be a huge plus. Because some of them are kind of arcane. I certainly don't have to tell you or the chair of the planning board or Cheryl or anybody else that there is a complexity here that can be befuddling to many people. So to have it done is a good idea. Questions by the membership, because as I said, we will probably not vote on this till we have the text. So Kathy, you have the floor. You're muted, Kathy. It's okay.
Sorry about that. I didn't hear an answer to your question about the timeline of when it would be done.
Yeah, Tim, what do you think that's going to be?
So sorry for not catching that and not being clear. So the work is done. We have and I have to give an enormous amount of credit to Alex Whiteside, who I see is on the call. I think he may be here to speak to another article, but he has really been the workhorse of this project on behalf of the Bylaw Review Committee. And I anticipate we'll be working closely together to present this to town meeting if we get all the necessary recommendations and everything that we need. But that work has been done. So like I said, we are anticipating getting a final draft from our vendor next week. We'll do a final kind of box checking kind of review of that. And then we're going to want to get that into your hands and into the town clerk's hands and into the moderator's hands to distribute to town meeting members.
We will need it as quickly as possible, but to know
absolutely.
To know that Alex has been involved also is helpful to some of us, because I think Alex has forgotten more about the zoning in town than some of us will ever know. So it's good to know that you have the institutional memory that is so valuable as well. Plus, you've also got very competent people at the planning board whom I'm sure are going to make sure that this is carefully implemented. Any other questions for the membership before we move on? Tim, thank you very much for coming tonight, and I hope you and the deputy over there enjoy whatever evening activities short of Chutes and Ladders that he might beat you at. You'll be able to play.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you all very much. The next item on our agenda is a citizen's petition. And Alex, I think this is yours, is it not? Are you with us?
I'm with you.
Okay, you have the floor. Thank you for joining us.
Well, it's great to be here. It's always great to be before the Warrant Committee. But
you always say the right thing.
In particular, because this is a good article. This is a citizen's petition to amend the temporary apartment bylaw. And the temporary apartment bylaw is a bylaw that's been in effect for many, many years. It was before I joined the board in '86, and it had been there for a while before then. So it's an old bylaw.
Alex, I'm going to interrupt you. Do we have this? Can we put this up on the Lynn? Do we have this to put up in screen share?
if Tim
Yes.
were still there, he used to have it on screen share. I don't have it.
Okay.
George, just give me 1 minute and I'll pull it up.
Yeah,
for you.
yeah. Alex, keep going. And Lynn, as soon as you get it, just put it up.
All
But
right.
Alex,
Well, this
continue.
is good because this is just the preface, and we'll get into the specifics. In any event, over the years, people have said this article, which is designed to help elderly people who want their families to live in their large houses in apartments. And it's limited to apartments in existing houses without any additions and without using the garage. And it's been considered in need of amendment for a number of years. And it seemed like a good time to propose the amendments that have been identified over the years. And I'm going to just, oh, great. Here are the amendments. Go to page one. And all right. Number one is we have, as I was saying, the temporary apartment is under the existing bylaws supposed to be contained in an existing house. No additions, no use of garages, and that's been a problem. Most temporary apartments have needed additions, or many have needed additions, and that would have required a variance. So the change is to allow temporary apartments in existing dwellings, including additions and including attached garages. However, they're not allowed in buildings which are not part of the single family dwelling. And that's the way it is. I mean, the current bylaw says no apartments in detached buildings, and I didn't change it because what I've tried to do is retain the bylaw as it is, but make the changes that have been identified as problems and not try to rewrite the whole thing.
Yep.
Number two, there is a problem in the current bylaw in that you have to list the names of all the tenants. And the tenants have to be relatives, or they have to be relatives. The tenants have to be relatives. And listing the names is not a good way of going about assuring tenancy. Just specify that the tenants have to be relatives, as it is now. And then we've suggested adding that tenants also can be caregivers to elderly persons and childcare providers. And that's new, but it's in the spirit of what we have.
But there's no requirement that they have to be blood relatives or relatives by marriage or any of that nature.
Well, I think it could be blood relatives or relatives by marriage.
But it doesn't explicitly state that's required.
Well, what it says is that at least one of the tenants living in the premises during the term of the special permit must bear one of the following relationships to at least one of the owner occupants, or to a spouse, a former spouse, or a deceased spouse of an owner occupant. And then it says mother, father, stepmother, stepfather, child, stepchild, grandparent, grandchild, aunt, uncle, niece, nephew. That's what we've got now. And I didn't change it.
Okay, all right.
I
That's
didn't
what I
change
wanted to
it.
know.
I simply added, I
Yep.
added a caregiver for elderly persons and a child care provider, because I thought that those were issues that have been raised, that people would like caregivers and child care providers to be able to live in the temporary apartment. I've been
Right, got it, okay.
So number 3 has to do with the relationships of the tenants. And if you move the up to 3, currently the tenants have to be related to each other or a caregiver to an elderly person. We don't change that, but we do add that there can be a child care provider as well as a caregiver for an elderly tenant living in the either the temporary apartment or the principal dwelling unit. Number 4 has to do with design. And currently, since there is, since the temporary apartment has to be contained within the existing house, you don't know much. You don't need much design on the exterior. But here we allow additions, and we allow the attached garage to be converted. And so this language simply says that you've got to show what you're going to do to the house when you install this temporary apartment. Number 5 has to do with termination of a temporary apartment. There's language in the current zoning which sort of indicates that if you have a temporary apartment and it gets terminated, and these things the temporary apartments are given for a term of 4 years, and so there is a subject to reapproval for another 4-year period, and possibly for many more beyond that. But if it does get terminated, the language in the current bylaws seem to say that you had to rip everything out and have a construction crew come in and do a lot of work. And in most cases, when you terminate a temporary apartment, you take the stove, you take the refrigerator and remove them. And then you use the space, and you use the space as part of your living quarters. Because what really distinguishes a temporary apartment from guest quarters is the presence of a kitchen. And if you remove the kitchen, you basically remove the essence of the temporary apartment. So this makes that clear. Number 5, I guess that was number 5.
Yes.
Number 6, there are a number of restrictions in the current bylaw talking about how you have to keep it entirely within the house. You can't use the garage, and you can't, make an addition. And since it's proposed to change that, all that language comes out, and you put in language that it can be contained in additions and attached garages. However, we retain the current language that the temporary apartment cannot be located in a separate building. And if you, it's complicated, because if you try to change this bylaw to allow apartments in separate buildings, you get a lot of issues, setback issues. You get a lot of issues that simply would be new provisions. And as I said, this is supposed to make changes to the existing bylaw without substantially changing what's there. Number 7 has to do with termination, and the termination reasons are the same, but when we have a provision that if you sell the property with a temporary apartment and the new owner wants to continue the temporary apartment, the new owner can go to the building commissioner and say, I want to continue it. I'm the owner occupant. The tenants are qualified. And with that, the building inspector can approve a extension of the special permit, which authorizes the temporary apartment without there being a new hearing before the Board of Appeals. It makes clear that if you have a owner occupant who goes to Florida, up to 6 months is fine. A temporary absence of up to 6 months doesn't cause the owner occupancy requirement to be violated. The expiration provision says that if you don't have to go to the Board of Appeals to renew a special permit for a temporary apartment, that you can renew it the same as a new owner can renew it by going to the building commissioner and saying, I'm still the owner occupant, the tenants are qualified, I'll abide by the terms of the special permit and the statute, and the building commissioner can then extend the permit without there being a hearing before the Board of Appeals. And there is, for those people who forget, there's a little grace period provided of 60 days that if a permit runs out, if the owner occupant sees that within 60 days, he can go to the building commissioner and get the permit renewed without having, once again, to go to the Board of Appeals. The final section of number 8 just says that since the building commissioner will authorize extensions, the Board of Appeals doesn't have to send out notices of them. And number 9, we've provided is a definition that has been superseded by the definition that we began with. And the old definition just didn't talk about additions and garages, and the new definition does. So those are the changes. They are all changes that people who deal in these temporary apartments have said would be good changes. Would be good changes to make, that they would make it easier for people to have temporary apartments, to maintain temporary apartments, and there are really no downsides. So the citizens have petitioned the town meeting to make these changes, and if they are made, I think there will be a lot of happier people in the town. Thanks.
Alex, thank you very much. I'm not quite sure how to proceed with this because we have already voted to remand the ADU as it's been presented to us to the town meeting. Now, the town meeting can do whatever it wants with that recommendation. They can follow it, they can ignore it, they can make amendments to it, et cetera. But I guess given that this citizen petition is here now, we'll just deal with it for the moment. I would imagine then the question I would put to the chair of the planning board, to Cheryl and whoever else is there, is I know that Alex has brought his perspectives to your discussions on a couple of occasions. And I'm interested to hear your feedback for the benefit of the Warrant Committee, how these changes compare to the existing article that is now before the special town meeting next Monday night. So it's an interesting confluence that we have here. I leave it to either you, Denny Swenson, or Cheryl Tagayas to enlighten us on what input you've had, what back and forth has been, et cetera. I'm sure there has been, but we're interested to hear what your thoughts are here.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Asher, and thank you, Warrant Committee members, for all of your service. The Planning Board opened our public hearing on the citizens article to amend the existing temporary apartment bylaw last week. This citizens article, as you know, is coming to town, the annual town meeting in May. So a point of clarification, the temporary apartment bylaw already exists. We have 30 of these units in town already. They would fall under the category of accessory dwelling units, but this is a different bylaw than the article coming to town meeting next week in March. So as you know, these amendments, as Alex explained, are a response to the public discussion goal of improving the existing temporary apartment bylaw. As Alex Whiteside, elaborated on, it's full of improvements. And they're not really controversial improvements either. The new language opens up and expands who can occupy the units. It expands the footprint of the units to add additions and detached garages. It makes the termination of the unit easier and less costly for the applicant. It makes the creation of the units less costly to create. You don't need as many design plans. Selling the house ends the temporary apartment status, but new language makes it easier for the new owner to apply for a new term without having to go to the Board of Appeals. They can simply apply through the building inspector. And renewal of the 4-year term is an easier process for the applicant with notice and extensions offered. So just a quicker way of summing up what Mr. Whiteside said, but across the board, these changes do make the temporary apartment bylaw easier and less costly for the applicant. The legal language is in good order, as you are familiar with.
Compare this, if you can, Denny or Cheryl, to the accessory dwelling unit that is currently before special town meeting. The two cannot exist in the same space, I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, so the ADU article, this article takes something that we already have in place and it creates progress. The ADU article is about introducing new approaches, is a quick and easy way of explaining it. And that was one of the reasons, out of sensitivity to the proponents of the accessory dwelling unit article, the planning board held off on voting last week on this article because we knew that the accessory dwelling unit would be before the town meeting next week. But we just thought it was important for the public to understand that there are two different articles out there. This is a standalone. It can stand by itself without the accessory dwelling unit article, or it could stand alongside the accessory dwelling unit article.
Can it stand in place of it, I guess, is a question that has been brought up.
I mean, I guess I imagine Cheryl and I might have a different opinion on that, but I believe that it can stand on its own. It would be for family, where the accessory dwelling unit would be, open market rate for anyone.
Right.
So they're different in that way.
Okay. Question, Kathleen O'Donnell, your hand is up from the planning board. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair Asher. You may remember that last year I did a presentation to the Warrant Committee on the differences between our temporary apartment bylaw and the accessory dwelling unit bylaw. That was last year. I know many things have happened since then. But as Chair Swenson said, it is a different approach. I think it's more complicated. We believe, we listened to the citizens petition and Alex Whiteside's explanation of it the other night. And clearly, it seems to me that it's not a process that people would use if the accessory dwelling unit bylaw passes on next week, because it is more cumbersome. In fact, the existing bylaw says as a temporary apartment, it's not just enough of taking out your stove and your sink or something like that. You have to submit plans to the zoning board that shows how you reincorporate the unit into the house. It's not just a question of taking out the stove. So it's a little bit more complicated and more expensive to do the plans for that. But it's a work in progress, and certainly if unfortunately the accessory dwelling unit doesn't go forward, these improvements that Alex Whiteside and the citizens have proposed would make a pretty bad bylaw slightly better. But I don't think it's a huge improvement, but it would be better. And so we left the hearing open because we felt that we wouldn't make a final recommendation until after next Monday. Didn't make much sense. So, and there may be some additional citizen, comments that are getting made as a result of the vote at special town meeting.
Yep. Both Steve and Kristen have their hands up, but Cheryl Tagayas has her hand up, and she may have something interesting to add before we go to your question. So I'll recognize her with your indulgence. Cheryl, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Asher, and thanks, Kathleen and Denny, for speaking to this. I just want to point out that one of the things that Tim Zawinski pointed out to the planning board in a memo that he provided to us before at the time of our hearing on this article was that he felt as if one of the important things that's lacking, I guess you would, if in the temporary apartment bylaw as compared to the ADU. And so you had asked a little bit about the comparisons. And the temporary apartment bylaw actually lacks what's called the purpose. Most of our sections of our bylaw they start out with a purpose, because you can then look at an application and see whether it actually is meeting or addressing the purpose that's stated. And so the purpose is actually pretty clearly outlined in the ADU bylaw that's before town meeting next week. And I suggest that its purpose might be a little bit different in that it wants to address, there's 5 things, and if you'll indulge me, Chair, I'll read the 5, just so we can be clear. Okay. Yeah, so it's to increase the range of housing choices, to encourage a more energy efficient and economical use of the current housing stock. Number 3, to develop housing units on single-family residential properties that are appropriate for households at a variety of stages in life. Number 4, to encourage greater diversity of population with particular attention to young adults and senior citizens. And 5, to help the town meet its housing needs without detracting from its historic character and its existing patterns of development. So some of those things are not addressed in the temporary apartment bylaw, because the temporary apartment bylaw, as has been identified, is very limited in who can live in these temporary apartments. And so it doesn't have as broad a range in terms of what it might be able to accomplish. So I just wanted to add that to what's already been said.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Steve, I think your hand was up next. You have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. I just have a couple questions. I keep hearing the name building commissioner, And I guess he's the policeman that's going to make sure that we or the town adheres to these new laws and things. But I don't know who that is, and I don't know how much power they have, and how do they going to control this? Because we could all of a sudden have dozens and dozens of these things going on in town, and with what control does he have, or he or she? Sorry, didn't mean to be.
In other words, what's the mechanism for oversight and quality control and
Yes.
monitoring, et cetera, et cetera, et
Yep.
cetera? Alex, do you have that considered, or do we have a response from the planning board, I guess?
I will, the building commissioner is the chief enforcement officer in the town. The building commissioner enforces the zoning. If the building commissioner doesn't enforce the zoning, no one does.
Right.
The current building commissioner is Joseph Prondak, and he does a good job. He enforces the zoning, and I have no doubt whatsoever that the enforcement mechanism here would be effective, and that we wouldn't have, it wouldn't be scofflaw heaven. The building inspector takes his responsibilities seriously, and the town keeps after him. So that's my view.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Kristen, does that answer your question, Steve?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Kristen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Asher. I was able to attend the public hearing on the ADU article, but I was not, did you say you also had one on the citizens petition as well? I was just wondering, what was the general sentiment and overall feeling shared by the residents in town about this petition?
So at our public hearing last week, there was a lot of interest and a lot of support. It was a continuation of something that the people have said has been working for them, although we have had a lot of discussions about ways to make it better and ways that it hadn't been working in the past. But we, at our first public hearing last week, that we have continued to the end of the month, we got a lot of positive feedback and a lot of interest in these improvements.
Kristen, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Alex for the citizens petition, or any other inputs from either the planning board members or Alex? Anything further you'd want to add?
George, can I add one thing?
Of course, Cheryl. You have the floor.
I would request that the warrant committee not take a vote on this until after we close the public hearing, which as Denny identified would be later in the month, because they really, as you I think may have asked earlier, the planning board decided we wanted to wait to see how the vote of town meeting goes next week on the ADU article before taking our own vote on this article. So we would request that the warrant committee do the same, or I would request. I guess we didn't take a vote on that, but we did take a vote on ourselves of waiting.
So that's ordinarily it wouldn't be difficult. I guess the question is going to be when would you be making that vote happen? Because we are running, sadly, once again, we're going to run up against a brick wall because we have to have everything drafted and in by the 30th of March. And this is as small and teeny weeny as the special town meeting warrant was. This one is going to be an encyclopedia, I'm afraid. So I'm concerned about our ability to process all this. So I guess the question is going to be what is the date? And if it falls within our ability to do that, I'm happy to cooperate and to postpone our vote. But I guess the question is, how long is the notification period and when will you have your vote?
But then what meeting did we just send that to?
We had discussed having our finishing this on the 24th of March. But if that's, could you recommend a different date? Could you recommend?
Yeah, we have to have it at the printer by the 30th. So we have to have our drafting done, well before that. Can you do it? I know what do you need, a 2-week notification period?
We opened our public hearing, so it's a continuation of an open public hearing. We don't.
Ah,
need to
okay.
again. So we
Is there
could
any
possibly,
possibility you could do it next week? Because that would help us a lot, because we're gonna have to do votes on the budget and on these non-budget articles within the next 10 days.
okay, I will aim for the 17th. The only problem is we have town meeting next week, so I don't know if the other members can join me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I will suggest, I will push for the 17th or perhaps early in the week, maybe the 21st or 22nd or something.
We will do the best we can to accommodate. We understand that timing is everything in life, and we can also have a sense. Go ahead, Cheryl. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, Denny, I think we have to do it on the date that we continued it to, because we don't
announced
have
the date. We announced the date
Yeah.
at the meeting.
Public hearing.
Oh, you did? Oh.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if
Well-
you need a vote before, George, having served on the Warrant Committee in the past and knowing it's not ideal, but you could have no recommendation at this time due to the timing issues, and
We
then
could.
have a green sheet or something like
Yeah.
that. I know it's not ideal, but
It's not ideal, and I think in my chairmanship, we've done that maybe once, because I genuinely don't like to do that. It just gets messy, but we will do what we have to do. Alex, you have the floor.
I would suggest that the planning board could meet and it could close the public hearing without there being they could do it next week. They could do it at any time. Just close the public hearing, and I think that would take care of the problem, and that they could then go and develop a recommendation.
Again, that's certainly an interesting procedural thing. I will not interfere in the process. So however the chair and the board wants to handle it is fine with us, obviously, and we will accommodate as